In the summer of 2015, a 34-year-old cave explorer named Marcus Webb set out on what was supposed to be a weekend filming trip in the sandstone canyons of southern Utah. He had a helmet, a rope bag, 2 cameras, a lighting rig, and years of experience documenting hard-to-reach places. Before slipping underground, he radioed one last message to a friend on the surface. "If I'm not out by nightfall, call it." He never came out. For 6 months, search teams, drones, and park rangers combed the area. No scent trail, no gear, no sounds, just a man who had vanished into rock. The case went cold. Marcus's friends knew he was experienced enough to handle a simple cave like that. 6 months later, 2 of his closest friends, fellow cavers who had vowed to retrace Marcus's last steps, returned to the site. And inside that same crevice, wedged in the blackness, they saw something that made one of them drop their light. What they found would prove their instincts had been right all along, and reveal a truth far more sinister than anyone had imagined. Riley Thompson stood at the edge of Devil's Garden, staring into the same sandstone slot canyon that had swallowed her best friend 6 months ago. The August heat shimmered off the red rock, but down in that crack in the earth, she knew it would be cool and dark, the kind of darkness Marcus Webb had loved to capture on film. "You sure about this?" asked Ethan Cray, adjusting his headlamp and checking his rope gear for the 3rd time. He'd been Marcus's climbing partner for 5 years, but Riley could see the doubt in his eyes. "We've been over this canyon 3 times already." "Not like this," Riley said, pulling Tom Bradley's hand-drawn map from her pack. "I've been thinking about something Marcus said before he went down. He mentioned the route looked different from what he remembered." She spread the map on a flat boulder, weighing down the corners with rocks. "Look at this. Tom marked the main passage here, but I've been in this system before with Marcus. The passage splits about 30 feet down, not 60 like Tom drew it." Ethan leaned over the map, his shadow falling across the penciled lines. "You think Tom made a mistake?" "I think Tom Bradley doesn't make mistakes. 23 years guiding in southern Utah, perfect safety record, knows these canyons better than anyone." Riley traced her finger along the marked route. "So why would he give Marcus a map with the wrong passage marked?" The question had been eating at her for weeks. It started small, just a nagging feeling that something didn't add up about Marcus's disappearance. An experienced caver doesn't just vanish in a system he'd explored before. And Tom Bradley's explanation had been too neat, too quick to blame caver error and unstable rock. "Maybe we should talk to Tom first," Ethan suggested. "Ask him about the map discrepancies." "I tried. Called his office 4 times this week. His assistant says he's busy with tourist season, can't spare time for follow-up questions about closed cases." Riley had known Tom Bradley for 8 years, since she'd first started serious caving. He'd been Marcus's mentor, the one who'd taught both of them advanced rope techniques and canyon navigation. The idea that he might be hiding something felt like betraying family. But the math didn't work. Marcus was too good, too careful, too experienced to make the kind of mistake that would get him lost in a familiar system. "There's something else," Riley said, pulling out her phone. "I've been going through missing person reports for southern Utah. Look at this." She showed Ethan a screenshot of a police report dated 3 months ago. "Jennifer Lawson, 29, experienced climber from Colorado. Went missing in Buccaneer Trail Canyon, about 15 miles from here. Last seen with a local guide." Ethan read over her shoulder. "Doesn't say which guide." "It doesn't have to. There are only 3 commercial guides licensed for the technical canyons in this area: Tom Bradley, Sarah Martinez, and old Pete Kowalski. Pete's been retired for 2 years, and Sarah only does family groups and beginners." Riley swiped to another report. "David Chen, 31, photographer from California. Disappeared 4 months ago in Wire Pass. And look at this one, Kevin Murphy, 26, from Denver. Missing since February in Antelope Canyon." 4 people in 6 months, Ethan said quietly. 4 experienced cavers and climbers, all with technical skills, all in canyons where Tom Bradley is the primary guide. Riley folded the map and stuffed it back in her pack. Either southern Utah suddenly became 10 times more dangerous, or something else is going on. They began their descent into the Slot Canyon, following the route Marcus had taken 6 months ago. The sandstone walls rose on either side, carved by millions of years of flash floods into smooth, flowing curves that looked more like sculpture than rock. 30 feet down, Riley found what she was looking for. The passage split Tom's map had missed. The left branch continued straight, following the path Tom had marked. The right branch angled sharply downward, disappearing into darkness. Marcus would have gone right, Riley said, shining her headlamp into the deeper passage. He always took the harder route, the one that might have better shots. The one Tom didn't mark on his map, Ethan added. They followed the right passage, their headlamps cutting through air that hadn't moved in months. The walls grew tighter, forcing them to turn sideways in places. Water had carved the sandstone into impossible shapes. Bridges, archways, chambers that opened up like cathedrals before narrowing again to barely shoulder width. "Riley," Ethan called from ahead, "you need to see this." She squeezed through a particularly tight section and found herself in a circular chamber about 20 feet across. Ethan was kneeling beside something on the floor, his light focused on a small pile of equipment. Camera batteries, still in their packaging. "These are the same brand Marcus used," Ethan said, picking up one of the battery packs. "Lithium rechargeables, professional grade." Riley examined the packaging. No water damage, no significant wear. "How long do you think these have been here?" "Not long, maybe a few months at most. But Marcus had disappeared 6 months ago, which meant either someone else had been in this chamber recently, or Marcus had made it further into the cave system than anyone thought. Riley's radio crackled to life, the emergency frequency she'd left open to the surface. "Riley, this is base camp. You guys okay down there?" She keyed the mic. "We're fine, Sarah. Found some equipment. Might be Marcus's." "Copy that. Hey, I just got a call from Tom Bradley. He heard you were back in the canyon and wants to talk to you. Says it's important." Riley and Ethan exchanged glances. Tom Bradley, who'd been too busy to return her calls all week, suddenly wanted to talk. "Tell him we'll be up in a couple hours," Riley said. "He says it can't wait. He's driving out to the site now. Should be there in 30 minutes. The radio went silent. Riley stared at the battery packs in her hand, a chill running down her spine despite the desert heat above. Tom Bradley was coming to them, the man whose map had sent Marcus into the wrong passage, the man who'd been too busy to answer questions about a missing friend. "We need to keep moving," Riley said. "I want to see how far this passage goes before Tom gets here." "Riley, maybe we should go back up, talk to him." "No." Her voice was firm. "Marcus came this way. I want to know where it leads." They pressed deeper into the canyon, following a passage that didn't exist on Tom Bradley's map. And with every step, Riley became more certain that her friend's disappearance hadn't been an accident. It had been something much worse. The passage twisted deeper into the sandstone, leading them through chambers Riley had never seen before, despite years of exploring these canyons. Her headlamp beam revealed fresh scratches in the rock, the kind left by climbing gear scraping against stone. "Someone's been through here recently," Ethan said, running his fingers along the marks. "Look at this." He pointed to a section where the rock showed clear signs of rope wear, the sandstone polished smooth by repeated friction. Riley examined the marks with her light, estimating angles and patterns. "This wasn't just one person," she said. "Multiple trips, different rope positions. Someone's been using this route regularly." They squeezed through another narrow section and emerged into a chamber that made Riley's breath catch. The space opened up like a hidden cathedral, maybe 50 feet high, with natural skylights carved by erosion. But it wasn't the geology that stopped her cold. It was the equipment. Professional climbing gear hung from anchor points drilled into the walls. Carabiners, pulleys, even a battery-powered winch system that looked like it could haul serious weight. All of it expensive, all of it perfectly maintained. "This is a staging area," Ethan said, examining the winch. "For what?" Riley's light swept across the far wall, where someone had carved a rough shelf into the sandstone. On it sat a waterproof case, the kind used to protect electronics in wet caves. She opened it carefully. Inside were maps, detailed, hand-drawn charts of cave systems throughout southern Utah. But these weren't like Tom Bradley's tourist maps. These showed passages, chambers, and access points that didn't appear on any official survey. "Jesus," Riley whispered, spreading one of the maps on the ground. "Look at this." The map showed the canyon they were in, but with far more detail than Tom's version. Every passage, every chamber, every potential hazard was marked with precise measurements and notes. And in red ink, someone had marked 3 locations with the letter X. "What do you think the X's mean?" Ethan asked. Riley studied the marks. One was in the chamber where they'd found Marcus's batteries. One was deeper in the system, maybe another hour's travel. The third was in a section she didn't recognize, a complex of passages that seemed to connect to Buccaneer Trail Canyon, where Jennifer Lawson had disappeared. "We need to reach that second X," Riley said, folding the map. "If Marcus made it this far, maybe he left more signs." But as they prepared to continue deeper, Ethan grabbed her arm. "Listen." Voices echoed from somewhere behind them, distorted by the canyon walls, but clearly getting closer. Riley killed her headlamp and motioned for Ethan to do the same, plunging them into absolute darkness. "Told you they'd be down here," came a voice she recognized. Tom Bradley, but his usual friendly guide persona, was gone. His tone was sharp, worried. "How much do you think they saw?" Another voice, younger, unfamiliar. "Enough to cause problems. We should have handled this months ago instead of hoping they'd give up." Riley's blood went cold. Tom wasn't here to help with their search. He was here to stop it. She felt around in the darkness until she found Ethan's hand, then slowly guided him toward the back of the chamber where the equipment was stored. If they could stay hidden until Tom and his companion moved on, they might have a chance to escape through one of the deeper passages. But Tom's voice was getting closer, and now she could see the glow of his headlamp reflecting off the canyon walls. "Check the staging area," Tom said. "If they found the maps, we've got a serious problem." Footsteps scraped against stone, moving directly toward their hiding spot. Riley pressed herself against the canyon wall, hoping the climbing equipment would provide enough cover. Tom's light swept across the chamber, pausing at the waterproof case Riley had left open. "Shit," he muttered. "They found the maps." "What do we do?" the younger voice asked. "Same thing we did with the others. They came down here, got lost, never made it out. Happens all the time in these canyons." Riley's heart pounded so hard she was sure Tom would hear it. The others? How many people had disappeared because they'd stumbled onto whatever operation Tom was running down here? Tom's light swung toward their hiding spot. In seconds, he'd see them. "Tom?" Ethan's voice rang out from the opposite side of the chamber. "That you, man?" "Thank God. We've been down here for hours." Riley watched in amazement as Ethan stepped into Tom's light, acting like he'd been waiting for rescue instead of hiding. The performance was perfect, confused, grateful, completely innocent. "Ethan?" Tom's voice shifted back to his public persona, warm and concerned. "What are you doing down here? Sarah said you were just doing a quick check of the upper passages." "We found some of Marcus's gear," Ethan said, walking toward Tom with casual confidence. "Thought we'd follow the trail, see if we could find more signs of where he went." "Marcus's gear?" Tom's companion stepped into the light, a lean man in his 30s with the kind of tan that came from serious outdoor work. "What kind of gear?" "Just some batteries, camera equipment, nothing major." Ethan was doing a masterful job of appearing naive. "But it made us think maybe he made it further into the system than anyone thought." Tom's expression was unreadable in the shadows cast by their headlamps. "That's interesting. Where exactly did you find this gear?" While Ethan led Tom and his companion toward the chamber where they'd found the batteries, Riley slipped deeper into the staging area. She needed evidence, something that would prove what Tom was really doing down here. She found it in a second waterproof case hidden behind the winch. Insurance documents. Copies of life insurance policies for Marcus Webb, Jennifer Lawson, David Chen, and Kevin Murphy. Each policy was worth between $500,000 and $1.2 million. And each policy listed Tom Bradley as the named beneficiary. Riley photographed the documents with her phone, her hands shaking with rage and fear. Tom hadn't just been guiding these people to their deaths, he'd been profiting from it. A systematic insurance fraud scheme using his reputation as a trusted guide to lure victims into unmapped cave systems. But where were the bodies? The missing people? Her radio crackled softly with a transmission on an emergency frequency. "Base camp, this is Marcus. Day 186, still alive, still looking for a way out. If anyone receives this, we're in the deep system below Devil's Garden. Tom Bradley's maps are wrong, deliberately wrong. Don't trust him. Don't—" The transmission cut to static. Riley's hands trembled as she stared at the radio. Marcus was alive. After 6 months, he was still alive somewhere in these caves. And now she knew why Tom Bradley was so eager to stop her search. Riley's mind raced as Marcus's voice echoed in her memory. Day 186. That meant he'd been keeping count, staying organized, staying alive. But the transmission had cut off abruptly. Either his battery had died or something had interrupted him. She quickly switched her radio to the same emergency frequency and keyed the mic, keeping her voice to a whisper. "Marcus, this is Riley. If you can hear this, we're in the staging area. Tom's here with us. We found the insurance documents. We know what he's doing." Static, then faintly. "Riley? Jesus Christ, Riley, is that really you?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. "It's me. Where are you? How many others are with you?" "3 of us total. Me, Jennifer, and David. Kevin didn't make it past the first month. We're in a chamber system about 2 hours deeper, following the old riverbed. Riley, you have to get out of there. Tom's not just stealing money. He's running something bigger. There are others involved, people who—" The transmission cut to static again. From the main chamber, she could hear Tom's voice, growing more insistent. "You said you found batteries. Where exactly? I need to see the location to determine if it's safe for you to continue." Ethan was stalling, but Tom was getting suspicious. Riley had to move fast. She photographed the rest of the insurance documents, then noticed something else in the case, a satellite phone with GPS coordinates programmed into it. The coordinates corresponded to locations throughout southern Utah, each marked with dates and dollar amounts. A business ledger of murder. She memorized the coordinates for the chamber where Marcus was supposed to be, then carefully returned everything to look undisturbed. As she prepared to rejoin the others, her radio crackled again, this time on the frequency Tom would be monitoring. "Base camp to Canyon team, we've got weather moving in. Flash flood watch issued for all slot canyons. Recommend immediate evacuation." Tom's voice carried from the main chamber. "Copy that, Sarah." "We're bringing everyone up now." But Riley caught something in his tone. Relief, not concern. A flash flood would solve his immediate problem. Wash away any evidence, eliminate any witnesses who'd seen too much. She slipped back toward the group, staying in the shadows until she could position herself near Ethan. "Found some interesting rock formations back there," she said casually as she emerged into the light. "Might be worth documenting on the way out." Tom's eyes narrowed slightly. "No time for sightseeing. Sarah's right about the weather. These slot canyons can flood in minutes once the water starts moving." "Of course," Riley said. "Safety first." As they began climbing back toward the surface, Riley managed to catch Ethan's eye and tap her radio. He nodded almost imperceptibly. He understood they needed to communicate. The ascent was tense, with Tom's companion, who'd introduced himself as Jake, staying close behind them while Tom led the way. Riley noticed Jake kept one hand near his belt, where she caught a glimpse of a knife handle. They weren't guides. They were handlers. And now that she and Ethan had seen too much, they were in the same danger as Marcus and the others. As they reached the narrow passage where they'd have to move single file, Riley made her decision. She pretended to stumble, dropping her water bottle so it clattered against the canyon walls. In the confusion of everyone's lights swinging toward the sound, she keyed her radio and whispered, "Marcus, coordinates 37.4419, negative 111.3906, moving to your location tonight. Don't try to transmit again. They're monitoring." "Everything okay back there?" Tom called. "Just clumsy," Riley said, retrieving her bottle. "Sorry." They continued upward, emerging into the desert evening. The sky was clear, no sign of the weather Sarah had reported. But Tom seemed eager to get them away from the canyon. "I'll drive you back to town," he offered as they reached their vehicles. "We can talk about what you found, figure out next steps for the search." "Actually, we need to head back to camp first," Ethan said. "Get our gear organized, file a report with Sarah about the equipment we found." Tom's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I really think we should talk first. Compare notes, make sure we're coordinating our efforts properly." Riley felt the weight of the insurance documents' images on her phone. Tom couldn't let them leave without knowing how much they'd discovered, but he also couldn't make them disappear in broad daylight with Sarah expecting them back at base camp. "How about we meet tomorrow morning?" Riley suggested. "Early, before it gets too hot. We can show you exactly where we found Marcus's gear." Tom nodded slowly. "That works. Say 7 a.m. at the trailhead?" "Perfect." As they drove away, Riley watched Tom in her rearview mirror. He was on his phone, having an animated conversation with someone, making plans, she was sure, for dealing with the problem she and Ethan had become. "He's not going to let us walk away from this," Ethan said once they were out of earshot. "I know. That's why we're not going to give him the chance." Riley pulled over at a rest stop and showed Ethan the photos she'd taken. "Look at this." Ethan's face went pale as he scrolled through the insurance documents. Jesus Christ, he's been murdering people for money. Not just murdering, they're still alive down there. Marcus, Jennifer, David, they're being kept alive for some reason. But why? If he's already collected on the insurance, why not just... Riley thought about the staging area, the professional equipment, the systematic organization of it all. What if the insurance money is just the beginning? What if there's something else they need from the victims? Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging or join your friends underground." Riley showed the message to Ethan. "They're watching us." "So what do we do?" Riley stared at the canyon entrance in the distance, thinking about Marcus counting days in the darkness, about Jennifer and David trapped with him, about Kevin who didn't make it past the first month. "We go back tonight, we get them out, and we make sure Tom Bradley never does this to anyone else." But as they drove toward base camp to gather rescue gear, Riley couldn't shake the feeling that Tom was already several steps ahead of them. The man who'd systematically trapped 4 experienced cavers wasn't going to be easy to outmaneuver. And somewhere in those dark passages, Marcus was counting day 186, not knowing that help was finally coming. Whether it would arrive in time was another question entirely. Riley and Ethan returned to base camp as the sun set behind the red cliffs, painting the sandstone walls in shades of orange and purple. Sarah Martinez looked up from the camp stove where she was preparing dinner, her weathered face creased with concern. "You guys were down there longer than planned," Sarah said. "Find anything useful?" Riley exchanged a quick glance with Ethan. Sarah had been part of their search team from the beginning, but Tom Bradley's operation was clearly bigger than one man. They couldn't trust anyone until they knew how deep the conspiracy went. "Some gear that might be Marcus's," Riley said carefully. "We'll know more after we analyze it." Sarah nodded, but Riley caught her checking her phone immediately afterward. A quick text to someone, maybe innocent coordination, maybe something else. "I'm going to turn in early," Riley announced. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." In her tent, Riley spread out a topographical map and used the GPS coordinates from Tom's satellite phone to plot a route to Marcus's location. The path would take them through some of the most technical canyon systems in southern Utah: narrow passages, vertical drops, and water features that could trap or kill inexperienced climbers. But it would also avoid the main routes where Tom might expect them to travel. At midnight, Riley and Ethan slipped out of camp with full technical gear: ropes, harnesses, emergency food and water, first aid supplies, and most importantly, bolt cutters in case they found the survivors chained or restrained. The desert night was surprisingly cold, with a canopy of stars that provided just enough light to navigate by. They hiked cross-country to avoid the established trails, using night vision scopes to pick their way through the rocky terrain. "There," Ethan whispered, pointing to a narrow crack in the sandstone that looked like nothing more than a shadow. "That should be the entrance." The descent was harrowing in the darkness. They rappelled down a series of drops, their headlamps creating a cone of light in an ocean of black. The canyon walls pressed close on either side, and more than once Riley had to fight off waves of claustrophobia. 2 hours in, they reached a section where the passage forked in 3 directions. Riley checked the GPS coordinates. They needed the middle passage, which angled sharply downward into what appeared to be a natural water channel. "This is where it gets dangerous," Riley said, examining the route ahead. "Flash flood zone. If it rains anywhere in the watershed, this whole system fills with water in minutes." They moved carefully through the flood channel, noting the polished walls and debris lines that showed how high the water could rise. Ancient driftwood lodged 20 feet above their heads told the story of past floods that would have been instantly fatal to anyone caught in the passage. Riley's radio crackled softly. "Day 187. Still here." Water level dropped enough to reach the food cache. Jennifer's fever broke. David's leg is healing, but slowly. "If anyone's listening, we need medical supplies. Antibiotics, bandages, anything you can—" The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by static. "We're close," Riley said, checking her GPS. "Maybe another 30 minutes. But as they rounded a bend in the passage, Ethan grabbed her arm. "Light ahead." Riley killed her headlamp and listened. Voices echoed off the canyon walls, too distant to make out words, but definitely human. Multiple people, moving with purpose. They crept forward until they could see the source of the light, a natural chamber lit by battery-powered lanterns. And standing in the center, very much alive, was Tom Bradley. He was talking to 2 men Riley didn't recognize, both armed with hunting rifles. Between them sat 3 figures that made Riley's heart jump: Marcus, a woman who had to be Jennifer, and a man she assumed was David. All 3 were chained to anchor points drilled into the canyon wall. "Buyers are getting impatient," Tom was saying. "They want the organ harvesting to begin soon, or they're moving to another supplier." Riley's blood went cold. Organ harvesting. The insurance fraud was just the cover story. The real money was in keeping the victims alive long enough to harvest their organs for black market sale. "What about the 2 who came down today?" one of the armed men asked. "The Thompson woman and her friend?" "Handled," Tom replied. "Accident on the trail back to camp. Very tragic. Sometimes people fall in the dark." But Riley and Ethan were very much alive, crouched in the shadows 50 feet away. Which meant Tom was lying to his associates, buying time while he figured out how to deal with the threat they represented. "The shipment needs to go out tomorrow night," Tom continued. "Start with the photographer. He's got the best blood work. The woman can wait another few days, but her kidney function is declining. The other one's infection needs to clear up before we can use him." Riley looked at Marcus, who appeared gaunt but alert. He was watching the guards, studying their patterns, looking for weaknesses. Even after 6 months of captivity, he was still fighting. Jennifer looked weak, her skin pale, and her breathing shallow. David had a makeshift splint on his leg and moved with obvious pain. All three had the hollow-eyed look of people who'd given up hope of rescue. Riley needed to change that. But taking on 3 armed men in a confined space would be suicide. She needed a different approach. She pulled out her phone and carefully photographed the scene, making sure to get clear images of Tom and his associates. Then she opened her emergency contacts and composed a text message to every law enforcement agency she could think of: FBI, state police, local sheriff, park service. But when she tried to send the message, her phone showed no signal. They were too deep underground for cellular communication. "We need to get back to the surface," she whispered to Ethan. "Call for backup." "What about Marcus and the others?" "If we leave now, they might not be here when we get back." Riley looked at her friend, barely recognizable after months of captivity and medical abuse. Tom had mentioned organ harvesting starting soon. If they left to get help, they might return to find empty chains and 3 fresh graves. But if they tried to rescue the prisoners now, they'd likely end up captured themselves. Or dead. The radio on Tom's belt crackled. "Base camp to Tom. Package delivery confirmed for tomorrow night. Buyers will be in position at the airstrip at midnight." Tomorrow night. Less than 24 hours before Marcus, Jennifer, and David were scheduled to be murdered for their organs. Riley made her decision. "We're getting them out tonight. All of them." "How?" "There are 3 armed men and—" Remember what Marcus always said about caving? Sometimes the only way out is through. Riley began studying the chamber, looking for alternate exits, weaknesses in the guard positions, anything that could give them an advantage. Because in less than 24 hours, her best friend was going to die unless she could figure out how to beat men with guns using nothing but climbing gear and desperation. The rescue had to happen tonight. Failure wasn't an option. Riley studied the chamber layout, counting seconds between the guards' patrol patterns. Tom had positioned them well, one at the main entrance, one near the prisoners, and Tom himself mobile between positions. But there was something he hadn't accounted for. The water channel they'd followed to reach this chamber continued past the lit area, disappearing into darkness on the far side. If Riley could reach that passage without being seen, she might be able to circle around behind the guards. She pulled out her climbing gear and whispered her plan to Ethan. "Give me 15 minutes to get into position. When you hear me shout, hit them with every light you have. Blind them completely, then cut the prisoners loose while I deal with the guards." "Riley, they have rifles. This is insane. Marcus has been counting days for 6 months. I'm not letting him reach day 188. She slipped into the water channel, moving inch by inch through the darkness. The sound of her breathing seemed impossibly loud, but the guard's conversation covered any small noises she made. "Medical team arrives at dawn," Tom was saying. "Full surgical setup, portable equipment. We'll process all 3 and have them packaged for transport by evening." Riley's stomach turned. They were talking about her friends like livestock. The water channel curved around the chamber, bringing her to a position directly behind the guard stationed near the prisoners. Marcus was less than 20 feet away, close enough that she could see the hope flicker in his eyes when he spotted her movement in the shadows. She signaled for him to stay quiet, then began setting up her rigging. The chamber had good anchor points, natural rock formations, and bolted hardware that Tom's people had installed for their operation. She could use their own equipment against them. Riley clipped into a belay system and prepared her first move. The guard near the prisoners was isolated from the others, focused on watching the captives rather than scanning for threats. If she could take him silently, she'd have his rifle and a better position. She secured a rope around a natural rock pillar and began rappelling down the chamber wall, moving with the silent precision Marcus had taught her years ago. Every movement was controlled, every breath calculated. The guard was directly below her now, rifle slung casually across his shoulder, attention focused on something Tom was saying about transport schedules. Riley drew her knife, a multi-tool blade, but sharp enough for what she needed. She dropped the final 10 feet in complete silence, landing behind the guard and immediately wrapping her arm around his throat in a chokehold. He struggled for maybe 10 seconds before going limp. She lowered him quietly to the ground and took his rifle. Marcus's eyes went wide when he saw her emerge from the shadows with a weapon. She put a finger to her lips and began working on his chains with the bolt cutters. "Where's Kevin?" she whispered as the first chain snapped. "Didn't make it," Marcus replied, his voice hoarse from months of limited use. "Infection got him in month 2. They just left him to die." Riley's jaw tightened, but she focused on cutting the remaining chains. Jennifer was unconscious, her breathing shallow and labored. David was alert but weak, his injured leg clearly infected despite the makeshift splint. "Can you move?" Riley asked David. "I can try, but Jennifer needs medical attention. Soon." The second guard was walking their way, having noticed his partner's absence. Riley raised the rifle, sighted on his center mass, and shouted, "Ethan, now!" Every light Ethan carried blazed to life simultaneously: headlamp, handheld flashlights, emergency strobes. The chamber erupted in blinding white light that turned the guards into stumbling, cursing shadows. Riley fired a warning shot that sparked off the canyon wall inches from the second guard's head. "Drop your weapon, now!" The guard dove for cover instead, bringing his rifle around toward her position. Riley rolled sideways as his shot rang out, the bullet fragmenting against the rock where she'd been standing. Tom was shouting orders, trying to coordinate a response while half-blind from the lights. "Kill them all! We'll tell the buyers they died during transport." But Ethan was already moving, using his climbing gear to rappel down into the chamber from a different angle. He landed near Tom, swinging a carabiner like a flail that caught the older man across the temple and dropped him instantly. The second guard was trying to line up a shot on Riley when Marcus, freed from his chains, tackled the man from behind. 6 months of captivity hadn't destroyed the photographer's strength, just focused it into pure rage. They went down together, fighting for control of the rifle. Riley couldn't get a clean shot without risking hitting Marcus, so she charged into the melee with her knife drawn. The guard got his finger on the trigger just as Riley reached them. The rifle discharged into the canyon ceiling, bringing down a shower of rock fragments. But Riley's blade found the man's wrist, forcing him to release the weapon. Marcus grabbed the rifle and rolled away, covering the now disarmed guard, while Riley zip-tied his hands with climbing gear. "Is that all of them?" Ethan asked, keeping his lights trained on Tom's unconscious form. "Should be," Riley said, but she was already checking her phone for the photos she'd taken earlier. "But this operation is bigger than just these 3. We need to get the prisoners to safety and call in federal agents." She knelt beside Jennifer, checking her pulse and breathing. The woman was alive but clearly in medical distress, dehydrated, malnourished, and showing signs of kidney dysfunction. "We need to get her to a hospital," Riley said. "Tonight?" "The nearest medical facility is 2 hours away," Marcus said, his voice stronger now that hope had returned. "And we're at least an hour from the canyon entrance." Riley looked at the 3 people she'd come to rescue. Marcus could probably make the climb out under his own power. David would need assistance, but could likely manage with help. Jennifer might not survive the journey. But staying in the chamber wasn't an option. Tom's buyers would be expecting their shipment tomorrow night. When it didn't arrive, they'd send people to investigate. "We move now," Riley decided. "Marcus, can you carry some of Jennifer's weight?" "After 6 months down here, I can carry anything." As they prepared to evacuate, Riley's radio crackled with an incoming transmission. "Unknown parties in Devil's Garden. This is FBI Special Agent Sarah Chen. We received your emergency transmission and have teams en route. What is your current status?" Riley grabbed the radio. "Agent Chen, this is Riley Thompson. We have 3 rescued hostages and 3 suspects in custody. Location is approximately 2 hours below Devil's Garden entrance. 1 hostage requires immediate medical attention." "Copy that. Medical helicopter is standing by. Can you reach the surface?" Riley looked at Jennifer's pale face, at David's infected leg, at Marcus's determined expression. "We're coming up. All of us." The climb out of that canyon was the longest 3 hours of Riley's life. But when they finally emerged into the pre-dawn darkness to find FBI agents, paramedics, and a helicopter waiting, she knew they'd done something that mattered. Marcus Webb had counted 187 days in the darkness. Day 188 was going to be in the sunlight as a free man, and Tom Bradley's organ harvesting operation was finished forever. The FBI field office in Salt Lake City buzzed with controlled chaos as agents processed evidence from what they were calling the largest organ trafficking bust in Utah history. Riley sat in a conference room giving her statement to Special Agent Patricia Voss, while Ethan provided technical details about the cave system to the search and rescue coordinators. Through the window, she could see news vans gathering in the parking lot. The story was breaking nationwide. Trusted Cave Guide runs multi-million-dollar operation harvesting organs from clients he's supposed to protect. The insurance fraud was just the beginning, Agent Voss explained, reviewing the documents Riley had photographed. Bradley was collecting life insurance payouts while keeping the victims alive for organ harvesting. We're looking at a network that spans 4 states and possibly connects to international buyers. Riley's phone buzzed with a text from the hospital. Marcus stable. Jennifer in ICU but improving. David in surgery for leg infection. All expected to recover fully. Relief flooded through her. After everything they'd endured, the survivors were going to make it. "Miss Thompson, I need to ask about Tom Bradley's demeanor during your interactions," Agent Voss continued. "Did he seem nervous, suspicious of your investigation?" "He was careful," Riley said. "Professional, concerned. Exactly what you'd expect from a guide whose client had disappeared. If I hadn't found those insurance documents, I might never have suspected him." Agent Voss made notes. "According to our preliminary investigation, Bradley's been running this operation for at least 3 years. We've identified 7 potential victims, including the 4 you rescued and found. 7 families destroyed, 7 people who'd trusted a guide with their lives, only to become products in a twisted business plan." A knock on the door interrupted them. Another agent entered, carrying a tablet with what looked like financial records displayed on the screen. "Agent Voss, you need to see this. We cracked Bradley's encrypted files." Riley listened as the agent explained what they'd found: a detailed business operation with organ buyers in Mexico, Central America, and Eastern Europe. Purchase orders for specific organs, shipping manifests for medical equipment, even customer reviews rating the quality of previous harvests. The buyers were paying between $200,000 and $500,000 per victim, depending on organ compatibility and medical condition, the agent reported. Combined with the insurance payouts, Bradley was clearing over $1 million per kill. "What about his associates?" Riley asked. "The men we captured in the cave?" "Hired muscle mostly, but we found communication suggesting Bradley had contacts in other states running similar operations. This might be part of a larger network." Agent Voss's phone rang. She answered with a terse "Voss," then her expression grew grave. "When? How many?" She scribbled notes rapidly. "We'll be there in 20 minutes." She hung up and turned to Riley. "We just got reports of suspicious activity at 3 other cave systems in Utah and Arizona. Local authorities found evidence of recent occupation, camping gear, medical supplies, restraint devices. It looks like Bradley's operation had multiple sites." Riley's stomach dropped. "More victims?" "We don't know yet, but we need your expertise. You know these cave systems better than anyone, and you've seen how Bradley operated. Will you help us check the other sites?" Riley didn't hesitate. "Of course. What do you need me to do?" 2 hours later, Riley found herself rappelling into Antelope Canyon with a full FBI tactical team. The narrow slot canyon was beautiful in daylight, walls of flowing sandstone carved by centuries of flash floods. But knowing what they might find in the depths made every shadow seem sinister. The team moved systematically through the canyon, checking every chamber, every side passage, every possible hiding spot. Riley provided technical advice about navigation and safety, while armed agents secured each area. In a chamber similar to the one where they'd found Marcus, they discovered evidence of recent occupation. Sleeping bags, empty food containers, medical equipment still in sterile packaging. But no victims. "They cleared out recently," Agent Voss observed, examining the abandoned supplies. Maybe when news of Bradley's arrest started spreading. Riley studied the medical equipment. "This is surgical-grade stuff, portable operating theater, just like Tom mentioned." Her radio crackled with a transmission from one of the other search teams. "Base, this is Team 3 at Wire Pass. We've got something here. Looks like... Jesus Christ, we need the coroner." Agent Voss's face went pale. "Bodies?" "Negative. Grave sites. Looks like maybe 3 or 4 burials, recent. We need forensics and excavation equipment." Riley closed her eyes, thinking about Kevin Murphy, who didn't make it past the first month. How many others had died in these canyons while she'd been searching for Marcus? "There's something else," the radio continued. "We found a survivor, adult male, severely dehydrated and malnourished, but alive. Medical chopper is en route." "Identification?" Agent Voss asked. "Says his name is Carlos Rivera. Disappeared from Zion National Park 4 months ago." 4 months. Another family that had given up hope, another person the world thought was dead. Riley wondered how many more survivors might be scattered across the cave systems of the Southwest, waiting for rescue that might never come. As they emerged from Antelope Canyon, Riley's phone rang. Marcus's number appeared on the screen, the first time she'd seen it in 6 months. "Riley?" His voice was weak but clear. "I heard about the other sites on the news. Are you helping with the search?" "Yeah, we found another survivor at Wire Pass, a man named Carlos Rivera." "Thank God. Riley, there's something I need to tell you. During those months in the cave, the guards talked. This operation, it's not just Tom Bradley. There are other guides, other states, other cave systems. You're looking at dozens of victims." Riley's blood went cold. "How many others?" "I don't know for sure, but Tom mentioned Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico. Anywhere there are technical cave systems and tourists with money. They called it the network." Through the conference room window, Riley could see more news vans arriving. The story was getting bigger, the implications more horrifying. What had started as a search for one missing friend had uncovered a conspiracy that stretched across the American Southwest. "Marcus, get some rest. Focus on healing. We'll handle this." "Riley? Thank you for not giving up, for believing I was still alive when everyone else assumed I was dead." After hanging up, Riley stared at the map on the conference room wall. Red pins marked confirmed sites, yellow pins marked possible sites, blue pins marked recovered victims. The pattern that emerged was chilling, a systematic network of murder and exploitation hidden in some of America's most beautiful natural places. Agent Voss joined her at the map. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking Tom Bradley was just middle management," Riley said. "Someone organized this network, recruited the guides, set up the buyer contacts, established the operational procedures. Someone smart enough to run a multi-state criminal enterprise. We'll find them. All of them." Riley nodded, but her mind was already racing ahead to the next cave system, the next potential victim, the next family wondering why their loved one never came home from what should have been a safe, guided adventure. The network was bigger than anyone had imagined, and somewhere in the darkness, more people were counting days, waiting for rescue, hoping someone would care enough to keep looking. Riley intended to make sure those people weren't disappointed. 3 days later, Riley found herself descending into Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico with another FBI tactical team. Agent Voss had called her at dawn with urgent news. They'd intercepted communications suggesting the network was planning to abandon their remaining sites and eliminate all evidence, including surviving victims. "We've got maybe 12 hours before they execute their cleanup protocol," Agent Voss said as they rigged their rappelling gear. "Intelligence suggests at least 6 people are being held at facilities across 4 states. If we don't move now, they're all dead." Riley checked her equipment one final time. After 72 hours of non-stop cave rescues, her body was running on adrenaline and determination. They'd found 2 more survivors in Arizona and 1 in Nevada, but each site had also revealed evidence of victims who hadn't made it. The Carlsbad site was different. Instead of narrow slot canyons, this operation was hidden in the vast limestone chambers deep below the tourist areas. Riley's team had to navigate through restricted sections that required special permits, areas the public never saw. "Contact ahead," whispered Agent Martinez, the tactical team leader. 2 subjects, armed, positioned near what looks like a medical facility. Through her night vision scope, Riley could see the setup. Professional medical equipment, surgical lights, and restraint tables arranged in a natural chamber that had been converted into an operating theater. The organ harvesting facility Tom Bradley had mentioned was real, and it was active. But more importantly, she could see 3 people chained to the wall, alive, alert, watching their captors with the mixture of hope and desperation Riley had seen in Marcus's eyes. "We need to take them simultaneously," Agent Martinez said. "No warning shots. These people are execution if they think we're closing in." Riley positioned herself to provide overwatch while the tactical team moved into position. Her job was to guide them through the cave system and provide technical expertise, but watching armed FBI agents prepare to risk their lives to save strangers made her proud to be part of this operation. The assault was swift and precise. The 2 guards were neutralized before they could reach for their weapons, zip-tied and sedated within 30 seconds. But as Riley rappelled down to help with the victims, her radio crackled with urgent traffic from Agent Voss. "All teams, abort current operations and return to surface immediately. We've got intelligence indicating the network leaders are in your area. They're not running. They're coming to tie up loose ends." Riley looked at the 3 chained victims, a woman in her 30s, a teenage boy, and an older man who looked like he'd been captive for months. All of them were staring at her with desperate hope. "Agent Martinez, how long to get these people out?" she asked. 20 minutes minimum. The ascent through those passages is technical." Voss said abort immediately. "I heard her, but I'm not leaving these people to die." Riley made her decision. "I'll take point. If the network leaders are coming, they'll know these cave systems better than your team. You'll need local expertise." As they began cutting the chains from the victims, Riley's mind raced through possible escape routes. The main passages would be watched, but there were side chambers and alternate exits that casual visitors never saw. "Can you walk?" Riley asked the woman as her chains fell away. "I think so. How many others have you found?" 8 survivors so far, across 4 states. You're not alone anymore." The woman began to cry, not from fear, but from relief. After months of believing she was forgotten, help had finally arrived. They were halfway to the surface when Riley's radio crackled with Agent Voss's voice. "All teams, be advised. Subject Tom Bradley escaped federal custody during transport. Repeat, Bradley is in the wind and considered extremely dangerous." Riley's blood went cold. Tom Bradley, free and desperate, would know exactly where they were and how to get to them. He'd designed these facilities, recruited the guards, planned every detail of the operation. "Agent Martinez, we need to move faster." "I'm pushing as hard as I can. These passages aren't designed for rapid evacuation." That's when Riley heard it, voices echoing from the chambers below. Tom Bradley's familiar tone now stripped of any pretense of friendliness. "Kill them all. Every victim, every FBI agent, everyone who's seen too much. We burn this site and disappear." The teenage boy they were helping stumbled, his legs weak from months of captivity. Riley caught him before he fell, but the delay cost them precious seconds. "Riley Thompson," Tom's voice boomed through the cavern. I know you're up there. You've cost me everything. Millions in revenue, years of planning, a network that took decades to build. Riley keyed her radio. Agent Voss, Bradley's in the cave system. He's got backup, and they're moving to eliminate all witnesses. Extraction team is 15 minutes out. Can you hold position? Riley looked at the 3 rescued victims, all barely able to walk after months of captivity and medical abuse. Agent Martinez's team was good, but they were outnumbered and fighting in unfamiliar terrain against people who knew every passage. Negative, we're coming up hot. Clear the exits. But as they rounded the next bend, Riley came face to face with Tom Bradley himself. The man who'd been her friend and mentor for 8 years was pointing a pistol directly at her chest. "Hello, Riley," he said, his voice calm and conversational. "I think it's time we had a proper conversation about your future." Behind him stood 4 armed men, blocking the only route to the surface. And behind Riley, the 3 victims she'd sworn to protect were counting on her to get them out alive. The confrontation she'd been avoiding for 3 days was finally here, and this time there was nowhere to run. "You know what's funny, Riley?" Tom said, keeping the pistol trained on her chest while his men spread out to block any escape routes. "I actually liked you. You and Marcus both. You had real talent, real passion for caving. Under different circumstances, I might have recruited you instead of killing you." Riley kept her hands visible and her voice steady. "How long, Tom? How long have you been murdering people who trusted you?" "Murdering?" Tom laughed, the sound echoing off the limestone walls. "I prefer to think of it as resource optimization. These people were going to die anyway. Car accidents, disease, old age. I just accelerated the timeline and made their deaths profitable." Behind Riley, Agent Martinez was positioning his team for a defensive action, but the narrow passage left them with limited options. The 3 rescued victims huddled against the cave wall, terror replacing the hope that had filled their eyes moments before. The insurance fraud was clever, Riley said, trying to buy time. But organ harvesting? That's not resource optimization, Tom. That's butchery. Organ harvesting is a growth industry. Do you know what a healthy kidney is worth on the international market? $200,000 minimum. A heart can go for $500,000. These people were walking around with fortunes inside their bodies, too stupid to realize their true value. Riley's radio crackled softly with Agent Voss's voice. "Extraction team at cave entrance. Need your exact position for tactical support." Tom heard it too. His smile faded. "Tell your FBI friends to back off or I start executing hostages, starting with you." "They won't negotiate with terrorists, Tom. You know that." "Then I guess we're all going to die down here." Tom gestured to his men. "Kill the agents first. Save the hostages for last. I want them to watch." That's when Riley heard something that made her heart leap, the distinctive sound of rappelling gear clanging against stone. Multiple ropes, multiple climbers, approaching fast from above. Agent Voss's extraction team was coming down the vertical shafts Riley's team had used, bypassing the main passages entirely. Tom heard it too. His eyes went wide as he realized his exit routes were being cut off. "You clever bitch! You led them right to us?" "Actually," Riley said, "you led them to us. Every communication you've made since your escape has been monitored. Every location you've visited has been tracked. The FBI has been one step ahead of you since you broke out of federal custody." Tom's face flushed with rage. "Then why didn't they stop me sooner?" "Because they wanted the whole network, every guide, every facility, every buyer. You've been bait, Tom, leading them straight to your associates." The sound of tactical gear was getting closer. Tom's men were looking nervous, checking their weapons and scanning the multiple passages for threats they couldn't see. "Last chance, Riley," Tom snarled. "Call off your friends or everyone in this cave dies." Instead of answering, Riley dove sideways toward a natural rock formation that would provide cover. Agent Martinez and his team moved simultaneously, opening fire on Tom's men while shouting commands to the hostages. The cavern erupted in gunfire and shouting. Muzzle flashes strobed against the limestone walls like deadly lightning. Riley crawled behind her cover, pulling the rescued teenage boy with her while bullets sparked off the rocks above their heads. Tom was firing wildly, his carefully constructed businessman facade completely shattered. "You destroyed everything," he screamed. 20 years of planning, millions in revenue. You've ruined me?" "You ruined yourself the first time you sent someone into a cave to die," Riley shouted back. Agent Martinez's voice cut through the chaos. "Tango down." 2 tangos down. Bradley's moving toward the South Passage. Riley peered around her cover. Tom was indeed retreating, but not toward an exit. He was heading deeper into the cave system, toward the natural chambers that twisted and branched for miles underground. If he reached those passages, he could disappear into the limestone maze. The FBI could search for weeks without finding him, and in the meantime, he'd be planning his next move against the families of everyone who'd helped destroy his operation. Riley made a decision that Agent Martinez would probably court-martial her for. She slipped away from her cover and followed Tom into the depths, leaving the tactical team to secure the rescued victims and finish mopping up his associates. The pursuit led through passages so narrow Riley had to turn sideways, through chambers so vast her headlamp couldn't reach the ceiling. Tom knew these caves intimately, but so did Riley. She'd been exploring limestone systems since she was 16, and she understood how water carved stone, how passages connected, where the dead ends were. Tom was heading for what cavers called a suicide squeeze, a passage so tight that only experienced climbers would attempt it. If he made it through, he'd reach a section of the cave system that connected to the surface miles away from the FBI perimeter. Riley pushed harder, using techniques Marcus had taught her to move through tight spaces with maximum speed. She could hear Tom ahead of her, cursing and struggling with the narrowing passage. When she caught up to him, he was wedged in a chimney formation, trying to squeeze through an opening barely wider than his shoulders, the perfect place for a final confrontation. "Going somewhere, Tom?" Riley called out. He turned his head as much as the tight space allowed, his face flushed and desperate. "Riley, we can make a deal. I've got offshore accounts, cash reserves. We split it 50-50, and I disappear forever." "What about the families of your victims? Do they get a share too?" "They'll get closure. That's worth something." Riley studied the passage Tom was trapped in. If she left him there, the FBI would find him eventually. But if she helped him through, he might escape to kill again. Or she could do what Marcus would have done, what any good caver would do when faced with someone who'd perverted everything the community stood for. "Tom, you're stuck. That passage narrows to about 14 inches at the tightest point. You're not going to make it." "Help me," he pleaded, the businessman's mask completely gone now. "Please, Riley, for all the good times, all the climbs we did together." Riley considered it for exactly 1 second. Then she turned around and started back toward the FBI teams. "Riley, don't leave me here. I'll die in this passage." She paused and looked back. "You're right. You probably will. But you'll have plenty of time to think about Marcus Webb, Jennifer Lawson, David Chen, Kevin Murphy, Carlos Rivera, and all the others. Maybe by the time you die, you'll understand what you took from their families." Tom's screams echoed through the limestone chambers long after Riley had rejoined the tactical team. By the time the FBI extraction specialists reached the chimney passage, they found only an empty space and a pile of clothing. Tom Bradley had made it through the squeeze after all. But the exit led to a vertical shaft with no anchor points and a 200-foot drop to an underground river that had been running high from recent rains. They found his body 3 days later, miles downstream, in a chamber that would become his permanent tomb. The network was broken. The survivors were safe. And somewhere in the darkness, the limestone would slowly claim the remains of a man who'd spent years claiming the lives of others. Justice carved in stone. 6 months after Tom Bradley's death, Riley stood at the entrance to Devil's Garden Canyon, watching as work crews installed a memorial plaque beside the trail marker. The bronze inscription read, In memory of Kevin Murphy and all victims of the Southwest Cave Network. Their courage in the darkness will not be forgotten. Marcus approached from the parking area, moving with the careful gait of someone still rebuilding strength after months of captivity. He looked healthier than he had at the hospital, the hollow-eyed desperation replaced by something harder but more stable. "How are you holding up?" Riley asked as he joined her at the memorial. "Better. Physical therapy's going well. The nightmares are getting less frequent." He paused, studying the plaque. "Jennifer's doing well, too. She's thinking about going back to school, maybe studying law. Says she wants to help other victims." "And David?" "Full recovery. He's actually planning another cave expedition next month. Says he won't let Bradley's legacy keep him from doing what he loves." Riley nodded, but something in Marcus's tone made her look at him more carefully. "What about you? Any plans for getting back underground?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the canyon entrance where his nightmare had begun. "I've been thinking about that a lot, about whether I can trust caves again, trust guides, trust my own judgment." "Tom fooled everyone, Marcus. His reputation was spotless for 20 years. "I know, but I keep thinking about something he said in that chamber, about how easy it was to identify targets, people with high-value insurance policies, people who caved alone or in small groups, people who wouldn't be missed immediately if they disappeared." Riley felt a chill despite the desert heat. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we fit the profile perfectly. Experienced cavers with good insurance, small expedition groups, families who wouldn't panic for a few days if we didn't check in. Bradley didn't choose us randomly. He selected us like livestock." The implications hit Riley like a physical blow. She'd assumed Tom had been opportunistic, targeting whoever happened to hire him. But if he'd been actively researching and selecting victims... "Marcus, did you ever give Tom personal information? Insurance details, emergency contacts, medical history?" "All of it. It was part of his standard intake process for technical climbs. I thought he was just being thorough about safety." Marcus's voice grew bitter. "Turns out he was being thorough about something else entirely." Riley's phone buzzed with a call from Agent Voss. She'd been expecting this conversation. The FBI's investigation into the network had expanded far beyond what anyone had initially imagined. "Riley, I need you and Marcus to come to Salt Lake City," Agent Voss said without preamble. "We've been analyzing the data from Bradley's computers, and there's something you need to see." "More sites?" "More victims. The network was larger than we thought. Bradley wasn't just running operations in Utah, he was coordinating with guides across the western United States. We're looking at potential victims in 12 states over the past decade." Riley's knees went weak. "How many people are we talking about?" "Conservative estimate? Over 50 victims. But Riley, here's the thing that's going to interest you. We found Bradley's victim selection database. He'd been researching potential targets for years, building profiles, waiting for the right opportunities. And your name was in the database. So was Ethan's. You weren't just investigating Bradley's operation. You were scheduled to become part of it." The phone nearly slipped from Riley's hands. "When?" "According to his notes, he was planning to target you during your next solo expedition. He'd been monitoring your social media, your expedition reports, your insurance information. If Marcus's disappearance hadn't derailed his timeline, you might have been next." Riley looked at Marcus, who'd been listening to her half of the conversation. His face had gone pale. "Agent Voss will be there this afternoon." 2 hours later, Riley and Marcus sat in the FBI conference room, staring at computer screens filled with Tom Bradley's meticulous records. The scope of his operation was staggering, not just the organ harvesting network, but a comprehensive intelligence-gathering operation that had been tracking potential victims for years. He subscribed to caving magazines, monitored expedition permit applications, even had contacts in insurance companies who fed him information about high-value policies, Agent Voss explained. This wasn't a crime of opportunity, it was systematic predation. Riley scrolled through her own file, disturbed by the level of detail. Tom had known her climbing experience, her insurance coverage, her family situation, her typical expedition patterns. He'd even noted that she often caved alone or with small groups, making her an ideal target. "There's more," Agent Voss said. "We've been coordinating with agencies in other states, and we've identified at least 12 other guides who were part of the network. Some of them are still active." Marcus leaned forward. "Still taking victims?" "We don't know yet. But Riley, we need your help. You know the caving community better than anyone on our team. We need someone who can identify suspicious patterns, recognize when a guide story doesn't add up." Riley thought about all the caves she'd explored with trusted guides, all the time she'd put her life in someone else's hands based on nothing more than reputation and recommendation. How many other Tom Bradleys were out there, wearing friendly faces while calculating their victims' worth? "What do you need me to do?" "We want you to go undercover. Visit suspected guides, book expeditions, see if anyone tries to steer you toward dangerous or isolated locations. With your expertise and the FBI's support, we can identify and stop these operations before they claim more victims." Riley looked at Marcus, who was studying his own victim file with a mixture of fascination and horror. "What do you think?" "I think Tom Bradley destroyed a lot of lives," Marcus said quietly. "If there are others out there doing the same thing, they need to be stopped." "Even if it means putting yourself at risk again?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked up, and Riley saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen since before his disappearance: determination. "Riley, I spent 187 days in the dark because I trusted the wrong person. I'm not going to let that happen to anyone else." Agent Voss spread out a map of the western United States, marked with red pins indicating suspected network locations. "There are families out there who don't know their loved ones are dead. There are victims who might still be alive, waiting for rescue. And there are guides out there who think they can continue Bradley's work." Riley studied the map, each red pin representing potential horror hidden in some of America's most beautiful places. The network Bradley had built was wounded, but not destroyed. Without active intervention, it would rebuild, adapt, find new ways to turn trust into profit. "Where do we start?" Riley asked. Agent Voss pointed to a cluster of pins in Colorado. "There's a guide in Glenwood Springs who's had an unusual number of clients disappear over the past 3 years. His name is Robert Kane, and his pattern matches Bradley's almost exactly." Riley nodded, already planning the approach. She'd book an expedition with Kane, see if he tried to lead her into danger, gather evidence the FBI could use to bring down another piece of the network. But as she stared at the map, one thought kept echoing in her mind. How many Tom Bradleys were out there? How many friendly faces were hiding murderous intentions? How many families were about to lose someone they loved to predators wearing the mask of trusted guides? The network was bigger than anyone had imagined, and Riley was about to find out just how deep the darkness went. 3 weeks later, Riley drove through the winding mountain roads toward Glenwood Springs, Colorado, her modified climbing gear carefully arranged to conceal FBI surveillance equipment. In the passenger seat sat case files for 3 missing persons, all clients of Robert Kane, who disappeared during routine cave expeditions over the past 18 months. Her phone buzzed with a text from Agent Voss. "Kane confirmed for tomorrow's expedition. Backup teams positioned at all known cave entrances. You're covered." Riley had studied Kane's background extensively. Like Tom Bradley, he was a respected guide with an impeccable safety record, at least on paper. But the pattern was unmistakable. Clients with high-value insurance policies, solo expeditions to remote caves, and disappearances that were easily explained as caver error or equipment failure. She pulled into the parking lot of Rocky Mountain Adventure Guides just as Kane emerged from the building. He was younger than Bradley, maybe 40, with the lean build and easy confidence of someone who spent his life in dangerous places. His smile was warm and genuine as he approached her vehicle. "Miss Thompson, I'm Rob Kane. Thanks for choosing our outfit for your expedition." Riley shook his hand, noting the firm grip and direct eye contact. If she hadn't known what to look for, she would have trusted him immediately. "Thanks for accommodating such short notice. I know Marble Cave is pretty technical." "One of my favorites, actually. Great formations, challenging passages, but nothing an experienced caver can't handle." Kane's eyes swept over her gear appraisingly. "I see you came prepared. Most clients show up with hardware store headlamps and sneakers." "I've been caving for 12 years. I believe in the right equipment." "Smart philosophy. That's what keeps people alive down there." Kane paused, his expression growing concerned. "I have to ask, you're planning to cave solo after our guided tour, aren't you? I saw it mentioned on your permit application." Riley had deliberately included that detail, knowing it would appeal to predators who preferred isolated victims. "Just some photography work in the easier passages. Nothing too ambitious." "Well, if you change your mind and want company, I'm always available for extended expeditions. Some of those deeper chambers are spectacular, but they're not places you want to explore alone." The hook was subtle but unmistakable. Kane was already probing for opportunities to get her alone in dangerous locations. That evening, Riley met with the FBI surveillance team at a safe house outside town. Agent Voss had flown in from Salt Lake City to coordinate the operation, along with a technical specialist named Agent Rodriguez, who would monitor Riley's equipment remotely. "Kane's pattern is almost identical to Bradley's," Agent Voss explained, reviewing the case files. "Initial guided tour to assess the victim's capabilities and isolation preferences, followed by an offer for advanced expeditions to unmapped areas." "What happened to his previous victims?" Riley asked. "Sarah Martinez, 34, photographer from Denver. Disappeared during a solo expedition Kane recommended. Her body was never found, but her insurance company paid out $750,000. Riley studied the woman's photo. Young, athletic, with the kind of confident smile that suggested she could handle any challenge the mountains threw at her. "Michael Thornton, 29, software engineer from Boulder. Also disappeared on a Kane-recommended solo expedition. Insurance payout, $500,000. Another photo, another life reduced to an insurance settlement. And Jessica Liu, 31, travel blogger from San Francisco. Gone for 8 months now. Kane was the last person to see her alive. Her insurance company is still investigating, but they're expected to pay out $900,000. Riley's stomach turned. 3 families destroyed, millions in fraudulent payouts, and Kane was still operating, still targeting new victims. "Tomorrow's expedition will tell us everything we need to know," Agent Voss said. "If Kane tries to steer you toward dangerous or isolated areas, we'll have grounds for arrest. If he mentions insurance or tries to gather personal information beyond normal safety protocols, we'll know he's actively selecting you as a target. And if he tries to kill me? That's why you'll have a full tactical team within 5 minutes of your location at all times. Plus, your gear is equipped with GPS tracking, audio monitoring, and emergency beacons. If anything goes wrong, help will be there immediately." Riley nodded, but she couldn't shake the memory of Marcus counting days in the darkness. Even 5 minutes could be too long if Kane had learned from Bradley's mistakes. The next morning dawned clear and cold, with the kind of crystalline air that made the Colorado mountains look close enough to touch. Riley met Kane at the Marble Cave entrance, where he'd laid out professional-grade equipment and detailed safety briefings. "Beautiful day for it," Kane said, checking his ropes and hardware. "Marble Cave is perfect when the weather's like this. Stable temperatures, low humidity, good visibility." They descended into the cave system through a series of rappels that showcased Kane's technical expertise. His rope work was flawless, his safety protocols thorough, his knowledge of the cave system encyclopedic. Like Bradley, he was genuinely skilled at keeping people alive when it served his purposes. "This chamber is one of my favorites," Kane said as they emerged into a vast space filled with flowstone formations that glowed like frozen waterfalls in their headlamp beams. Most commercial tours never get this deep. Too technical for casual cavers. Riley photographed the formations while watching Kane's behavior carefully. So far, everything seemed legitimate, a professional guide showing off his local knowledge to an experienced client. But as they prepared to ascend back toward the surface, Kane made the offer Riley had been waiting for. "You know, if you're interested in some really spectacular formations, there's another cave system about 20 miles from here. Privately owned, so you need special permission to access it, but the formations are unlike anything else in Colorado." "Sounds amazing. What's the access like?" "Technical, but nothing you couldn't handle. The thing is, it's pretty remote. About a 3-hour hike just to reach the entrance. Most people aren't willing to make that kind of commitment." Riley's hidden recorder captured every word as Kane described a cave system that perfectly matched Bradley's victim selection criteria: remote, technical, isolated, and far from any potential rescue. "I'd love to see it," Riley said. "When could we go?" Kane's smile was warm and encouraging, the expression of a helpful guide arranging a special experience for a valued client. "How about tomorrow? We could make it an overnight expedition, camp at the cave entrance, spend a full day exploring the deep passages. The formations down there are absolutely incredible. Overnight, isolated, no witnesses, the perfect setup for another caving accident that would net Kane another insurance payout." "That sounds perfect," Riley said, sealing her fate as Kane's next intended victim. But this time, the predator was walking into a trap. And by tomorrow night, Robert Kane's operation would be finished forever. As they climbed toward the surface, Riley felt the weight of the 3 missing women's files in her pack. Sarah, Michael, and Jessica deserved justice. And the families who were still wondering what had happened to their loved ones deserved answers. Kane had no idea that his next victim was actually his executioner, and that realization was going to come far too late for him to do anything about it. The network's days were numbered. One guide at a time, one rescue at a time, one family at a time, Riley and the FBI were going to tear down everything Tom Bradley had built. The darkness that had hidden so much evil was finally going to be dragged into the light.